Hello, and welcome back to the Jasa channel. I was wanting to go ahead and try that stained glass project that I was talking about earlier, more as a gift than as a product to sell, which if you do that, planning to sell, I always recommend to really do the research, figure out what needs to be done, at least structurally, to keep the glass from falling apart. And so I'm going to give this kind of a wild shot here. I'm familiar with glass. I have a lot of experience with it, but I've never done stained glass in particular. And I'm kind of at that point where I kind of want to jump into it a little bit in the unknown. That way I can kind of explore it for my own, with my own kind of styles. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like going through like a forest and you have like a well laid out path with signs and trails and such. And that's kind of like a teacher having a mentor to teach you how to go. And I absolutely recommend going that route when you're getting into arts, getting into sports and such. But then, when I'm getting to this point, I kind of want to go off trail, you know what I'm saying? And see what I can explore and see what I can find and try not to get too stuck into the previous ways. And so here we go. I have these stained glass sheets of different colors here, and the plan is to cut them down with like kind of cold working techniques, and then use some copper foil around the edges, which will help adhere to the solder. And so it's kind of interesting. The foil, it's a tape, so that's going to adhere pretty easy to the glass. And then you solder it, and I guess once you get all the solder in there, then it's more of a structural thing, and it's less just the tape holding it on. I'm going to draw out I'm going to plan here. So this is going to be the problem here. I don't know how. I've never done this. A curved cut. I would love a ring saw or something to do that. If not, then I'm going to have to block it, or like blocky letters. Here I have more of a cut the pieces down into squares to assemble it, or just cut the entire thing out. Guess we'll just try both and see what happens here. Experiment, a little adventure. And so I do have my safety glasses. That's going to be very important. I would definitely hate to have some of this in my eye. I can't imagine that would be pleasant at all. And then I picked out a few colors here. Trying to go kind of across the spectrum of color. I didn't get any green, so this is the only green I have. I'm going to try first for this U shape. And I'm not sure if I want to do the entire U in pink. Or in one color, I kind of want to do multiple colors to make it more colorful. And so in lamp working, we normally use a simple tool like this to score the glass more in straight lines. And so I picked this up to see if I could use it more for curves. Might need some oil as well, or some oil or water. Could definitely see a small score line. I don't normally work with plate like this. Ooh. That's definitely not what I wanted. I think we're definitely doing pieces. Well, that's kind of the shape I'm looking for, something like that, but that's not the way to get it. Oh, there we go. Got some squares already. I just got to turn this into this. A J and a U, and then some more letters after that. and we'll go from there. Okay, I like the sound of that one. They're cheap too, so they might not work very well. Oh. Like these two pieces I could probably use. This one I'm gonna keep, but I'm not quite sure as well. There we go. It's definitely a skill thing here. It's got to practice a bit. I think I'm getting the hang of it a little bit. I haven't tried any curved yet. Curved shapes. I've always found, for me at least, in lamp working, it's always worked better to run my finger actually with the water over the score line. And for some reason, doing that versus just not doing it or just dabbing it with my tool, it just seems to work a little bit better. Like it forces it into the crack. So let's hope here that score I did is gonna. Honestly, don't know what's gonna happen here. Ah. So it went around, but didn't quite go up. It's supposed to go like that. Oh, there we go. Now, I can't say for certain if that was exactly what I drew with the pen, but it looks pretty close. And so, not like perfect J exactly, but something like this. There we go. If I wanted to do a cutout bee, I'd probably do it in, I'm assuming, at least 2 sections. And then like another section back here. Cleaning off the oils from the pieces now. That way they stick well with the copper tape, which is going to go around the edges. And so I do need to be careful not to touch or kind of rub my fingers along there, because they are sharp. But a nice clean surface will help the tape adhere better. I'm really liking the tape actually. It's just strong enough to hold together, but weak enough that I can snap it. The top of the J will be like that permanently. Or in case you're looking at it like this, maybe like that. Permanently, whichever way's right. I also won't record the entire process to make it a little bit faster and a little bit easier for me to learn. And so I was thinking of putting a border around it because it's going to extend out. That might give it some structural stability. Transparent colors, or these opaque, like really bright opaque colors. You know, I'm kind of imagining it as I'm walking in the room, and I want to really pop. I want people to point at it and say, what is that? I'll apply this flux paste to the areas that I'll be soldering, as well as a little bit on the outside of the solder wire as I go. This flux substance can do a few things. It can clean up the area by removing oxidation on the surface layer. It can also prevent oxidation by displacing oxygen. It's a liquid, and so it replaces the air. Also, removing those air gaps should improve surface area contact, which will boost thermal conductivity, allowing your solder to start melting a little more quickly. Which is something you might notice. Once that solder starts to liquefy, it'll just start flowing like water. On the microscopic scale, solid objects generally have a pretty rough surface, and so they make terrible contact with each other. I'm also doing a pretty terrible job at this connection here, this joint here. It is looking pretty rough itself. This is my first connection. I'm trying to learn what to do here. I also don't solder that often, maybe like once a year. The last time was in winter. I had a water line freeze up and burst on me. Those copper pipes do require a lot more heat, and so I used my GTT Bobcat, my glassworking torch. I ended up converting it into a hand torch after I purchased my Bethlehem Bravo, which is the torch you see in my main videos. And now a couple very, very important safety warnings that you'll want to pay attention to if you're doing this process. I'm using a lead-free solder here, which is making it a little bit more difficult. However, it is a little safer, as lead is toxic. You have to be very careful not to ingest or get lead into your body, as it does accumulate, and it is a neural toxin. You don't want to ingest the flux either, and it's best to use that in a well-ventilated area. The fumes can be a little bit hard on your respiratory system, so it's better safe than sorry. And now, when I was having some difficulties, I did take a second to check out a couple of other artists' videos just to help me jump over a couple of hurdles, which I do recommend if you're having a hard time. Watching other artists' work in video format especially can be very helpful. I did notice the soldering process was a little bit different than what I'm used to. Normally, I would heat up the area or the copper where the solder will be applied, and then allow the copper to melt the solder and flow it into place. That might not work here, as I don't want to thermally stress the glass with too much heat, but I do need enough heat for it to bind to the copper, which is also incredibly thin, so it heats up very rapidly. It's just a different kind of scenario altogether. And now I do have a lot of empty space, which I want to fill in with more glass. I'm thinking now a little bit more of a scene. I've got some different blue shades to represent the sky. The orange circle with the yellow triangles represents the sun, and that pink heart-shaped thing is a cloud. I'm also going to use that one greener plate I had and run it along the bottom to kind of represent grass. And now that I'm making this up as I go, looking back, I kind of wish I would have used less blue in the letters, since I'm using so much blue in the sky. I'd rather have more contrasting colors, so the letters would pop out from the background. But it's a work in progress. It's a learning project. It doesn't need to be perfect, which you do want to be careful with. Perfection can be a bit of a trap. Great way to be eaten by an Ouroboros. But being a gift, I do want it to look a little better. I'm going to go back and smooth out some of these lines. I'm not going to fix everything, but this is a great test for the 8K zoom functionality. I recently upgraded to more professional equipment from 1080p to 8K. And so this is what the shot would look like outside of that 7x digital zoom. And so I'm going to call it complete right here. There's still more work to be done, but it's gotten very big and complex, and it's already 2 weeks late, so I can't really hold off any longer. But since I haven't given it the structural stability I talked about earlier in the video, I decided I'm going to make a frame for it as well, which I've never made a frame either, so having the right tools can make all the difference. But then again, when it comes to certain hobbies and certain sports, let's take archery for example, owning the best equipment, buying the best bow, having the straightest arrows, won't make you the best archer without practice. You also can't practice without equipment, and if that equipment is terrible, it can make the practice a little bit harder. And so in the end, it does come down to a bit of moderation of both. Even just tuning the bow might be difficult because you can't shoot a straight shot. But once you know how to shoot, then you can pick up a bad bow and do pretty well out of tune. Inspector's back. Yeah, I did make a mistake there, sir. Kind of went straight in there a little too fast. This one's a little slower. What do you think I should do there? Just keep zoom into it? Thinking it? Okay, let's do that. Make the same mistake on both sides. That's a little lamp working trick. You know, you mess up one side of the project, then you just make the same mistake on the other side. Then it's even. Not very fancy, but I think it works. And now I didn't stain the white pine, the border itself, and that was intentional. It draws a sharp contrast against the dark background, which should draw the attention of whoever enters into the room directly on that border. And once that happens, you can't help but get distracted by the beautiful glistening glass in the middle. I finally have it complete here. Have it in the frame and everything. I put some little hooks on top to mount it. And I'm liking it. I think it worked well for my first piece. I didn't go around the edge with solder. That would definitely help reinforce it, give it some structural stability. And one thing I did want to note, I left this soldered area really rough. That was the first one I did. And then this one over here, I did come back and fix that, but didn't come back and fix this one. And that's kind of a little lesson, a little idiom that this is what you should expect when you start working. You know, you shouldn't expect to have really great work, but within time, with practice, then you start to progress and get to that point. And so the idea is largely about growth. You know, it's kind of like if you can think of, imagine a racetrack, not competing with others though, competing with yourself. You know, timing yourself around the track one day, seeing what you get. It might be like 10 minutes. And then you come back the next week and run again, and you get 9 minutes. And then you come back the next week after that, and you get 8 minutes and 30 seconds. And so you kind of start to ask yourself, how fast can I go? How strong can I get? You know, where's this growth going to lead? And that's kind of the idea. And honestly, if it was just about crossing the finish line, you could just run up to the finish line and jump over it and then go home, you know? But then what would that leave you? And so when we compare that to art, the process, you know, the goal is to cross the finish line, but ultimately to grow. And so the idea is to make something nice, but the overall goal is, you know, getting stronger and bettering your times. And so I hope you've enjoyed this video. This was just my first time here in stained glass. And I do have more ideas, more plans to keep going. I want you to keep following me along on this journey. And I'd like to see your artwork as well. Your first or most recent piece. Until then, stay melty.